but their children were saved, and their children's children. Generations were saved by one decision, one person. But changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it. So what starts here can indeed change the world. But the question is, what will the world look like after you change it?
Welcome to Public Access America.
Make a stand. I know I did. Thank you very much. And may God bless America. May God bless America.
If you're a fan of Adam Has a Beard, one of our other podcasts, you might have heard an episode called Jeffrey's Hot Dog Water, or Hot Dog Water with Jeffrey. And Jeffrey was the star, and he had a lot to say on a lot of subjects, and I loved Jeffrey. But one of the co-stars was Devi, and Devi and I seemed to have these little conversations within the conversation that I just really wanted to expand on because they were so interesting to me, and I honestly think they might shed light for other people, or other people might help to shed light on these subjects for me. So, hi Devi, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing really good. We started talking about people placing value on things, and I couldn't get past the fact that everything needs a value, and that maybe I was making the wrong choices, or maybe I was informing myself improperly to make the wrong choices. And that led me to the other thing we were talking about, which was the non-binary decision making. And I say that all the time to people, that just because I'm for something doesn't mean I'm necessarily against the opposite. And and I thought you might be able to help me with this stuff. And yeah, you seemed like you were interested in that conversation too. So let's start with putting value on things. How do we decide what we put value on, and how do we decide what that value is?
I honestly, that's a really good question. It's such a hard question to answer, and I don't have all the answers, but
of course not.
When we assign value to a thing, it could be monetary value, it could be emotional value, it can be any number of things, really. And the conversation that we were having was about, like, how do you assign monetary value to people, and like do that in a way that is appropriate and useful, but also, like, how do you avoid demeaning some people versus other people?
Yeah.
It's a philosophical question that you could turn around all day on, honestly.
That's why I thought it was a great subject, and I thought it was a great subject for people listening to. I wanted to confuse them just as much.
Right.
And do we have to put value on anything?
Right. I think that was where I was trying to make a point. Is like, why do we feel the need to assign monetary value to anything that we find interesting, right?
Right.
So how much, I've been thinking about this and kind of turning it around in my head a lot, is how much value did Picasso have when he was alive versus when he was dead, right? Like, his artwork was very controversial and what people thought was amateur or childish. And now we see this as an entirely new movement of art, and people will pay ridiculous sums of money. Now those pieces are considered priceless.
Right.
So how does one become priceless in a world where we assign monetary value to things?
And do you think that Picasso's art was priceless to him in the time after he made it, just because he had accomplished it?
I mean, as somebody who creates art, I feel like some pieces have more personal meaning behind them, and they're harder to let go of than other pieces that where you're just like, meh. I find it hard to do art under a commission constraint.
Right.
And I was actually, my 13-year-old daughter put it very bluntly and clearly to me, is I asked her, because everybody loves her artwork, she's an incredible artist, and she I was like, hey, so would you be willing to like make some of these for my friends and they'll pay you,
Hmm.
like, and she was like, I mean, I don't mind doing it occasionally, but I don't want to do it and make it feel like a job because doesn't that make it not fun anymore?
Right.
Um,
I saw a quote that said, if you do what you love, you'll never work another day in your life. And I thought, no, it just turns into work.
it does, yeah. So I love doing hair. I love it, but doing it every day, day to day, person after person, it can get really exhausting. Like
Sure.
it's not just doing hair; it's customer service, it's cleaning, it's
Mm.
folding laundry, it's dealing
Standing
with
at
late
weird
appointments.
standing at
Yeah,
weird angles for minutes at a time.
yeah. So, I'm creating something that has value to people, but everybody values that differently, like we were kind of talking about
Sure.
before. Um, and so it kind of takes some of the passion away from things when you're doing that. And,
Mm.
that's not to say that's a bad thing because I still love what I do and I still
Sure.
enjoy
But
it.
the value is decreased over time. To you,
Right.
what
Yeah.
you get out of it is decreased.
Right. Yeah. My purpose, right? We were talking about purpose. Um, and I feel like for the longest time, I was like, this is what I'm meant to do with my life. And
Hmm.
now I'm in my mid 30s and I kind of wonder, like, is that actually what I'm meant to do? And like, who gets to assign value? I was just having a discussion recently about we raised our prices when COVID hit,
Sure.
at work, and we were going to raise our prices anyway, but we kind of reevaluated, like, hey, how much is actually worth it? Like, what is this going to look like?
Hmm.
Um, and we ended up doing a little bit bigger of an increase. And some people are very okay with that. They're like, I expected that to happen. I
Sure.
expected you to raise your prices. I'm happy to pay them. I'm still going to tip you really well. Great. Um, we'll talk about tipping
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
point. But other people are like, well, what do you mean raised your prices? What, like, well, I'm already paying a lot of money for a haircut. I'm like, okay, well, so the value of that service to that person is a lot lower
Hmm.
versus other people. And just thinking about yourself in terms of how much you are worth, because you can't get my product without me in the
That's
equation.
right. Right.
So I guess value is a combination of things. You're looking at um, time,
Mm.
you're looking at resources, you're looking at experience and end product, right? Like
And
your
convenience.
convenience, absolutely.
Right.
Um, and it's so difficult to me to like wrap my brain around this, especially as somebody with like an invisible disability. Like, I feel like my time is more valuable because I probably don't have as much long-term time behind the chair as other people, because the more I do what I do, which I love to do,
Mm.
the less I'll be able to do it in the future,
I
as
understand
my
that.
body kind of deteriorates and stuff like that. So I'm also putting a value on the fact that I can't bank on doing this forever. And so I have a limited time sphere,
Right.
which is another layer to all of that.
So your value bumps into their value
Hmm.
in
And it's
in a
interesting
single
to
point.
see. Yes, it's like you're getting
Yeah.
the kind of like sausage finger thing where you kind of look beyond it,
Right.
right? Um, but you have to take all of that kind of with a grain of salt when people look at you and they're like, oh, that's too much. I'm like, okay, what? You're not paying for just a haircut.
Mm.
You're helping me pay my bills. You're paying for my time. You're paying for the space that we're in. You're paying for the electricity and the gloves that
Right.
I have to wear and the cleaning products. And there's so much that goes into it. And everything is so expensive.
Right.
Everything is so expensive. I had somebody the other day say, are these all your own tools? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, of
And he was
course.
like, does your boss like reimburse you? I'm like, no. And they're like, how much do you think all your tools are worth? Like, how much did you spend on them? I was like, probably about $3,000.
Mm.
And he was like, what? I was like, that's why your haircut's not $20, you know?
Right.
But
Yeah, like in a restaurant, it's labor, rent, and electricity times 3. And so
right.
it always amazes me that people are willing to pay $20 for a hamburger and fries when I know that that's 3 times the price of what it costs the restaurant. And so I find it harder because I know that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's just the thing is like, I think we've kind of all grown up in this idea of like, what is the best bang for my buck?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what can I get for the least amount of money and
Right.
still have it be okay?
Right.
You can buy a Hoover vacuum cleaner for $80 and have it be the worst vacuum cleaner you've ever had.
Right.
A Hoover is not specific, but you know, whatever cheap vacuum.
Yep.
Or you can buy a Dyson or a Kirby or whatever. You can buy those high-end vacuum cleaners and get longevity out of it.
Right.
Now, what I find interesting and slightly disturbing about that is that the more poor you are, the more expensive it is for you.
Yes.
So you have to buy that $80 vacuum cleaner because that's all you can afford, but you're going to have to buy another one 2 years from now because it's going to break completely.
Right.
Versus somebody who already has the income, the resources to be able to afford that higher end. They could buy 500, you know, of that vacuum cleaner and not blink an eye, versus, you know, they get to spend the money one time and have it last for 10 years.
Not to mention that's the percentage of income. A man that makes $400 a week spending $80 on a vacuum, that's almost a quarter of his income, as opposed to the guy that could spend pennies. You know, $80 to a man with $1 million is nothing, you know.
Which is so funny, and that goes back to value in general. It's like, what is that thing worth to somebody who has everything? It's like, how do I buy a gift for somebody who's got everything, right?
Yeah.
That's I think where intention comes in. It's like your thoughtfulness and your attention kind of plays a bigger role in
I agree.
everything. You know,
so
like
for
you can make it like a card, right? And it means more to somebody than a diamond ring.
That's right. For Christmas, my friend made everybody come up with 10 things under $25 that we could get each other. And I said, well, I was planning on making fudge for everybody, like variety packs of fudge. And he said, oh, that's great. And I was like, oh, cool. And so I started making the fudge, and he said, but you still have to get the gifts too. And I said, no.
That is the gift.
This is the gift. And I made an extra one for his neighbor because his neighbor makes him cakes. She adored it. She didn't need a $25 gift with it. And in fact, everybody kept saying, wow, that white chocolate fudge. Ooh, the peanut butter fudge. Ooh, the dark chocolate fudge. But nobody said, you know, thanks for the slippers or the candle.
Right. They weren't like, oh, you know, those slippers, wow, best slippers I've ever had, you know. Like it's that's what I find interesting about gift giving is it's one of the love languages, and not everybody appreciates it. Not everybody is like, oh, well, you know, I find value in this getting this gift. It's more acts of service. Like, I just wanted you to clean the living room, and that would have been a better gift to me than the $20 gift card to my favorite store. You know,
I agree.
Because you just have to learn how to communicate properly with people, and not everybody understands that about themselves, which is
it makes you feel better, right?
Right. Yeah. And, well, I love giving gifts. I'm not a good gift receiver. I'm like, oh, no, I didn't want that. I don't really care. Thanks. No. But I like giving gifts because I try to be thoughtful. Now, not everybody sees that as like a really amazing thing, or sometimes I'll get my feelings hurt because I don't feel like they're grateful enough, which is I know logically that that's not the case. But
oh my gosh,
it's like,
I had a friend tell me, if you're doing something to get gratefulness, to get gratitude, that's selfish, and you don't deserve
Yes.
anything from me because it's you getting something,
Hmm.
not me.
Right,
And
exactly, which is why you have to be so thoughtful, like
yeah, that hurt
when
my
you're,
head though. That really hurt my head. Doing things,
yeah.
how do I do things for people without getting
Mhm.
anything out of it? And would I even want to? And am I
Yeah.
selfish then for that? And oh, it was one of those conversations like our value thing that made my
Hmm.
brain hurt, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's that. I think that's, part of the problem is like, I think almost anything that you do for somebody else is kind of selfish in a way.
Yes.
Um, you have to say, it makes you feel better to do something for another person, or give something to another person, or
Mhm.
say something to another person.
Right.
I do this all day long. I tell guys, I love, guys are so bad at taking compliments. It cracks me up.
Mhm.
I have multiple clients that have been like, "Oh my God, you have the most beautiful eyes." Like, I can't
Aw.
see the rest of your face, but you have the most beautiful eyes. And they're like, thanks." And it makes me feel good to like make them kind of like, "Oh, like, thank you."
Right. But you were
um,
hoping it made them feel good down the line.
mhm,
They
right.
might be embarrassed in the moment, but later on he's
Hmm.
gonna say, "Wow, that felt good."
Exactly. But it's also self-serving, because I think it's like great to see somebody kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to
Yeah.
process with this information. Um,
Yes. How
yeah.
they don't know how to process that, and some of them take it the wrong
Hmm.
way, and some of them take it
Oh
more
yeah.
than it is or less than it is. Some people will
Hmm.
be insulted, and so it's just I always say I can control what I say to you, but I can't control how you hear it. And
Right.
I believe that if somebody's in a bad mood and I give them a compliment, they're going to be angry with that, you know?
Uh-huh. Exactly. Let them sit with it. Maybe it'll make them feel less bad, right?
Yes. Yes.
um, I inversely, I actually saw this. It was like a tweet or something, and it was talking about like strong women, and it was like, am I intimidating, or are you intimidated?
Mm,
It's not my responsibility to like manage your feelings and handle your feelings on you being intimidated by me. So don't call me intimidating if you are intimidated by me. Maybe figure out why you feel that way, right?
but then am I allowed to address that? If you're intimidating and I know why, can I address it with you
Um,
or with anybody?
I think that you can. I think that telling somebody to their face that they're intimidating is almost trying to like make them feel bad for asserting themselves.
Agreed.
Especially as like a strong, independent woman looking human. Uh
Right.
I've been told a lot that I'm really intimidating. And I'm like, am I? I didn't Was I coming off as intimidating just because I was being frank, or like giving you information?
Or short.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and sometimes you just have to say, this is the way it is, period. And guys
Hmm.
do that all the time, but they're not intimidating.
Exactly.
So, unless they're intentionally trying to be intimidating. So,
Yeah.
why is it? I always ask, okay, so why is it do you feel intimidated by me? Let's unpack that,
Yes.
um, and have a conversation.
That's a nice thing to do, though.
Well, not everybody's good at that.
No,
Can
people
I
hate
tell
that.
you?
And in fact, I was intimidated by some. I was supposed to do an interview. I shouldn't say this but
Hmm.
we met and she didn't expect to do it then. And I didn't know what she thought we were meeting to do other than,
Oh.
you know, and she was very curt and very short. And I said, all right, that's good,
Hmm.
good. And then I let her go and I said, wow, she was intimidating. But I spent the weekend thinking about why. And it was
Hmm.
because I had done other interviews and somebody else was like that. And we went forward with the interview and the whole interview was awkward and just I didn't even use it because it was so bad. She didn't want to answer questions. She was irritated about being there and I didn't know why she wanted to join. She didn't remember things that she had said in her show at times and it just and so as soon as this girl did that, it took me to a flashback of a previous situation that I had been in and then I inflicted that on her by saying that she's probably the same way and that wasn't fair, you know.
Well, that's what's interesting is like you formulate outcomes in your brain about the experiences that you've had that are similar in the past. So
Hmm.
you can't fault yourself necessarily for being like, oh, maybe I should back off from this because I didn't heed those warning signs before and I
Right.
went ahead with it and it didn't turn out well.
Right.
Um, my policy on most things is like, well, what's the worst that could happen? It sucks and I wasted some time, you
Right.
know. And I try to teach my kids that, like, okay, well, oh, I want to ask this person out, or oh, I want to see if my friend wants to come over, but I'm worried that they're going to say no. I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen though? Their parents say no and they don't come
Right.
over. But if you don't ever ask and you don't ever try, you're not going to get there. And
And
I feel like,
honestly, it takes more pain for the other person if they think you put thought into it. If you're
mhm,
just like, "Hey, did you want to come over?" They assume there was no thought behind it and they don't feel bad. But as soon as you
mhm,
say, "Hey, I've been thinking about this. Would you like to go out?" Suddenly there's awkwardness because you put thought into it and you
right.
decided the outcome in your head and now you're expecting this person to guess and do the exact same thing, and that's a lot of stress.
Oh yeah, it is. I think it's stressful for both people, you know. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, so I don't want to hurt your feelings. So what do I
Yeah.
do? Say yes or no, or like how do and you have to process all this so quickly in your brain, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh my god, what do I do? As a human being who's an introvert and like had tons of anxiety as a child, I was very shy.
Me too, yeah.
I constantly just go through that process, and sometimes my brain just stops and it's like,
Yeah.
and I say something completely
Yeah.
off, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm talking about, please ignore
Yeah.
me. Sometimes that's a good thing though. Like my
Yeah.
best friend is my best friend not because I wanted her to be. We actually ended up becoming friends because my ex was like, I want you guys to be friends. And I was like, I don't really want a friend. I'm an introvert. I don't need friends, you know?
Right.
Um, and he's like, just, you know what? Let's have a video game night with a bunch of people. And then somebody was like, I want brownies. And I was like, ooh, that's a good idea, but we don't have any. And she and I ended up going to the grocery store together and then like instantly becoming best friends because something
Nice.
she said or whatever. But I was really resistant to that idea at first. And that's, you know, like I was like, I was not a yes person at that time in my
Sure.
life.
But then it just suddenly happened in an instant as opposed to all the planning that was behind. All the planning made it awkward, but you just going to get
Hmm.
brownies, boom, you know?
Oh yeah, I'm terrible at planning. I'm notorious for being bad at planning. Like Jeff will attest to the fact that sometimes somebody will knock on the door and he's like, I wonder whose that is. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my friend. They're coming over for the weekend.
Nice.
I'm like, I forgot to tell you. And he's like, well, you know, I married you. I understand.
Right. I was
So,
married to a Filipino girl and their schedules go from like 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. You just don't stop.
mm-hmm.
And so I finally just said, just tell me what to wear. Because I found myself wearing like dress shirts and polos to go help people move. You know?
Right. You're like, just,
or
yeah,
or
just tell me
holy
what to wear.
jeans.
I don't care what the plan is. Just tell me what to wear.
Just tell me what to wear. Yeah. And I learned
Dress for success.
I learned to love that. Yeah. And
That's awesome.
I was introverted and I did the same thing. I took a lot of thought before I asked something and
Mhm.
I prepared myself for the negativity. And then I just at some point I just realized I could spend I could spend a week getting rejected and then feel bad, or I could just get it over with and say it really quickly, and then I don't have to waste that time and I can do other things with it. So I
Right.
generally blurt something out with a half thought because I'm interested, but I don't want to put all of the emotions I have behind it, that initial statement, you know?
Well, you're making an emotional investment
Hmm.
as a worrier, as a person who's like, ooh, I want to make sure I cover my bases. I don't want to sound
Right.
stupid or whatever.
Yeah.
I pre-plan like everything. I'm like, okay, well, what do I want to say? Like I've like written out things before.
Oh
I
yeah.
love making speeches. I'm always really prepared for things. So when I'm
Okay.
not, I'm like, well, let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a lot more fun to do it that way and just like wing it and be like, all right, well, let's see where this journey takes us.
Is it
Who
though?
knows? I don't know. Like, I mean, we went from talking about COVID to
Yeah.
gender binaries and all that last time. So who knows? It's a new adventure every time.
There you go. Yeah, but still you needed some sort of starting point.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody does.
Yeah. I don't yeah, that's my problem. My starting point was about an hour before I sent you the first message. So you're playing catch up. Like in my head, I had tons of things to talk about, and I always know I always know the conversation comes from conversation, from
Yes.
doing it so much. We're doing an interview with a lady, Jenna
Hmm.
Belk. Jenna Belk. Anyway, she's atheist, secular humanist, and my partner Lexi, she said, I want to do something on secular humanism and parenting because she has a newborn and she wants to learn about it. And I said, well, send me a show. And she sent me the show with Jenna on it. So I reached out to Jenna and Jenna said yes. And everybody's excited. But now my partner's a little nervous and she says, I hit a wall. And I said, I don't know how to tell her that honestly, just by getting Jenna to talk about her background and where she came to this point, that's going to give you your next question. And her answer is going to give me a follow up, which is going to give you a, but nobody knows that about conversation until they do it, you know?
Right. There's a flow. As long as you're connecting on some level without um the awkward pauses, as long as both parties really want to be there, I think
Yes.
that's where conversation really kind of rolls. It snowballs. It turns into
Yeah.
something else. It's really amorphous. It's The art of conversation is a real thing.
It
Uh,
is.
when I first started doing hair years ago, I have how many years now? 14 years ago.
Hmm.
I remember I would have new clients come in sometimes as referrals, and I would be like, "Oh, so how'd you hear about us?" And you're like, "Well, my friend told me about you, and they just basically said like she's really good at doing hair, but kind of quiet and awkward." And I was like, "That's accurate. I'm not gonna lie, I don't talk a lot."
Yeah.
And I kind of morphed into like sometimes I'm just like I don't even know when to shut up at this point.
Right.
But there's a lot going on in the world, and I have a lot to say. When I'm feeling really boring, I just there's some people I just sit down. They want their hair cut. You have to just kind of figure out how to navigate different kinds of people, and you
Right.
don't always get it right. There's
That's for
definitely a
sure.
few where I'll be like, "Oh, so tell me about what you do for a living." They're like, "Oh, I'm a doctor." I'm like,
Mm,
"So what kind of doctor are you?" "Oh, I'm a cardiologist." I'm like,
right.
"Wow, okay, I don't know where to go with this." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Do you want to
And I'll just like
elaborate on
stop
any of
talking,
that?
right? "Could you tell me more? I like learning new
Yeah.
things." Like, "No, okay."
Yeah. It's
Some
like
people are just not into it.
on dating sites, I always see the same thing. I want somebody that makes me laugh. Make me laugh. And I'm like, I don't even know you. You know?
Yeah,
What am I gonna come off like some
it's
douchebag
a
coming
non
in with some,
sequitur.
you know what I mean?
Right. "Hey,
Uh,
baby."
Eventually I'll make you laugh. Trust me, I'm witty, I'm sarcastic, I'm
Mhm.
urbane. You know?
Right. I love it.
But
Well,
how do you
some
do
people
that?
don't understand sarcasm. I dated a person who didn't understand sarcasm, and I was like,
Really?
"So, how do you live life? Like, how do you not how do you navigate that? I don't
Yeah.
understand because you just must assume everybody's really mean to you all the time."
Yeah.
Like, like,
Sarcasm.
wow, every human being is an asshole except for me. Like, wow. I'm like,
That's
I was
funny.
appalled.
Yeah. People told me I just have a sarcastic tone, like even
Mhm.
when I'm not being sarcastic. So, but I always think that's the introvert in me trying to play both sides, just to get out of the situation.
I definitely understand that. I've adapted to kind of playing a role at work. You have to kind of play a role. The
Right.
longer I've done it, the less I give a shit about what people think of me. But I definitely find myself sometimes kind of being like dialing it in a little bit. My voice changes. Everybody has a phone voice. Can we just say, like,
Right.
you answer the phone when you're at work and it's totally different than you would answer the phone when you know your friend is calling you. You're like, sup, bitch.
That's true.
But
That's true.
at work, you're like, hi, thanks for calling.
Hello.
And I hate that about myself. My
Right.
receptionist does not have a phone voice and it irritates me because she's just like, thank you for calling. And I'm like, you sound so bored though. Like,
Yeah.
you want people to be
Right.
like, oh, I'm invited. Or I don't know, maybe that's just me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've definitely, like, when you call somewhere and they're like, thank you for calling. And you're like,
Yeah.
everything okay? Do you hate your job? Should I even go there?
Right. But
So
she's just secure with herself. I think putting
yeah.
somebody at ease immediately makes it easier for me. My mom told me once, I told her, I said, I'm super shy, Mom. And she said, you're not. You're always talking to people. And I said, no, I'm always asking people questions so I can shut up and listen. And then
Same.
she understood that, and because she looked back on everything and she said, wow, you do that. And I said, I deflect a lot.
Right.
And so I think doing this is just part of me getting out of my shell, and then once I start talking about something, I'm just interested and I don't think about it anymore.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a very curious person. Like, I explore as many things as possible. I love learning about animals, or like RNA or DNA, or like the difference between I still can't do affect and effect. Like, what, I can never remember which is which, right? But I just like to learn. So when
Yeah.
somebody has a really cool job, like I have one of my clients is uh what is it, chiropterologist, which is he studies bats.
Hmm.
And I love bats. And I was like, so, he just walked in, his first time in one day, and I was like, so what do you do for a living? He was like, well, it's weird. And I was like, okay, well, like, tell me more. And he was
Yeah.
like, well, I study bats. And I was like, stop it. I want to be your new best friend. Tell me more. And he's like, well, it's kind of boring. And I'm like, there's nothing boring about this. And like,
Right.
maybe everybody else has always told him it's boring, but I just find something so interesting about
Yeah.
the
And these people don't
beautiful
believe
things.
you. They think you're kissing butt or something.
Absolutely. I was like, honey, you would know if I was not being genuine.
Right.
I would have zero interest. Like, I would be like, oh, interesting. No, when I say interesting, it's not actually interesting. I'm like,
Right, exactly.
interesting.
I know my
Um,
my first friend here, she's an escort, like a sex
mhm.
worker,
Yeah,
and we just talked and stuff,
yeah.
and I told her, I said, you understand your job is the least interesting thing to me. I said, your brain, that's
Mhm.
amazing. What's between your ears, that's interesting. What's between your
Mhm.
legs, not so much to me. It's a job.
Right.
And I don't ask
Yeah.
people about their working in a factory. You're my friend,
Right.
and you take me to Walmart, and I like
Mhm.
I like it when you cook and we cook together.
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of people define her because of that, and she
Mhm.
spent. I think she. I think she does it because of that, because it's her identity now, and it's just she's an
Mhm.
advocate,
Yeah.
and she enjoys that role, and she
Yeah.
enjoys being a mentor to younger girls, as strange as it is, and all of that made her, and it
Mhm.
was her and her perspective on life that told me, don't do things. She said, it's not a bargain. If you give me something and then I ask for something in return, that wasn't negotiated ahead of time. No.
Right.
Then you're just giving it to me. And I was like, all right, I like that, that's fine.
Mhm. Right, exactly. Well, so I think sex work is really interesting because it's work. Like, um,
Hmm.
I run actually a a Burning Man themed camp called Suspended Animation, and we jokingly call it pro bono sex work because we do uh, Japanese rope bondage suspension, and we call them bondage rides. So it's, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. There's some of our crew that's like, cool, whatever.
Right.
But what I find interesting about it is like you're trying to craft an experience for somebody, and you're doing the same thing in sex work, which is why we call it jokingly pro bono sex work.
Right.
Because you're crafting this experience that somebody else wants. This doesn't mean that's what you're into, and
Right.
like it's such a. I think there's a lot of value in sex work because
I do too.
gosh, that like some people just need to be intimate with somebody and they don't get that opportunity anywhere else. And by all means, if you need that intimacy and all you have to do is pay for it, good for you.
Like you said, everyone needs 7 non-sexual touches.
Absolutely.
And I found that she put so many restrictions on it. I don't even want to go into what, but it was work, and her clients saw her seeing it as work. She didn't create some fantasy. She didn't lie about it. She didn't like it, but it didn't bother her. And for her it was easy. But I told her, I was like, I respect you. I just don't respect the man that would just settle for just that. I just don't understand, because it isn't. There is no fantasy there. It's just, I don't know, going up to a squishy spot in the world. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Oh man. I think for some people that is the fantasy. It's like, I want to pay somebody, right?
Right.
But have a little dignity. Like I think dignity is really the important thing here. Is if we offer dignity to people who do sex work by legalizing it or at least decriminalizing it and offering safer options, like Nevada's doing a great job. They do a great job with it. It could be better. There should be more protections for those girls or boys or gender nonconforming people, whoever. But the fact of the matter is, like, if we gave those people dignity, there would be a lot more dignity in the job and being participating in a like really morally unreprehensible way. The problem is, like, you're inviting people to treat sex workers like criminals. You're like you're taking away the right of those people. And funnily enough, like, Seattle was founded on literally the backs of sex workers. They brought in so much tax revenue because they would essentially they would file taxes because everybody knew they were bringing in a lot of money, and they're like, where's all the money going in our economy? And they realized that all these women were seamstresses, and they're like, dang, these seamstresses are making a lot of money. And it turns out those were all of the sex workers in the brothels. And then they were like, whoa, wait a second, how are these people making more money than us? And I feel like it's just another tick in the subjugating women box, because primarily there's a lot of women who are sex workers. Like, you don't see as many male sex workers. So it's just interesting to me, like, but what, like, so it's okay for people to like make porn, and that's still sex work, but that's legal and that's taxable. But like, if somebody's making a transaction with another human being, that's not okay. I have a problem with that.
I don't understand the stigma. I think basically it's because when a man sees a woman, his initial thought is, ooh, what part of that is mine? And then to find out he has to pay for it, and that no part of it is his, and no part is just his, is infuriating to a lot of guys.
Guys are, like, throughout history, women are property. Marriage came out of property exchange.
Right.
You change somebody's last name, you actually take away that person's identity to become a part of your family. They don't belong to the parents anymore. Like these women were traded for sheep and land and cattle, and like, hey, let me sweeten the deal with the ugly one, and I'll give you 5 chickens as well. You know, like here's a wife and 5 chickens. Like, it was strictly property exchange, and the only reason that we really have monogamy is because of that. Human beings are not monogamous. Specifically, female human beings are not biologically monogamous, and it's really interesting that we've created this idea that people belong to each other, because in the animal kingdom you rarely see monogamy. And we are just another animal. Just because we understand our own communication amongst each other doesn't mean that other animal species don't have that kind of communication. It's just that we're dumb enough to not understand it.
Or are we smart enough to realize it's easier just to stick to one person?
Right. I mean, I don't know if that it's easier. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's not easy.
Well, even I've had the worst relationship of my life and the best relationship of my life, and I think both were easier than finding the next one. You know?
Oh, dating is the worst.
Living with what you have is easier than finding the unknown. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's part of what makes people cheat, is that it's easy to stay with that person, but you're still, like, biologically, like, your body is like, ooh, that person's attractive. That's interesting. And it's this, like, psychological chase of something new and shiny. And if we opened up and talked about non-monogamy more, like, it doesn't have to be polyamory, it doesn't have to, look a specific way. But if people talked more and said, hey, look, I'm having these feelings about things, and maybe we should have a conversation about it. And, you never know. Sometimes your partner's going to be like, fuck yeah, let's, like, both go out and do our own thing. And then it brings them closer together because they don't feel trapped. Because human beings don't like to feel that way. So there's this really great book called Sex at Dawn. And I'm not going to, like, I enjoyed reading it. There's some things that I didn't necessarily agree with, but it talks about, like, humans and non-monogamy and, like, the biological reasons that we weren't created for that. And it was really fascinating. That was my initial foray into, like, gender studies and sexuality studies. So yeah, it's really cool.
But see, all of that is just the binary decisions that we're told we have to make, right? Married or you're a slut, like,
right, exactly. So, like, are you going to be slutty, or are you going to be with that person for the rest of your life?
Are you married or faithful, right? Like, you
right,
can't wander out. You can't wander out and experience something new, even with your partner's permission, because you don't have the world's permission to do it. Because suddenly they care. They never cared before, but suddenly, I was thinking about that. Nothing has value until we look at it, right? Like, I don't care what's in the grocery store right now. It doesn't have any value until I'm hungry in there. And it's the same thing. People only judge when they realize something exists,
Yes.
And that's a shame. I mean, getting to know a sex worker made me realize that they're just people, and some people that have gone through some major stuff, and that have come through it and figured out how to cope with it, and they didn't make that binary choice, And
I think the idea and understanding intersectionality is really important to kind of understanding the world in general as a not binary thing.
Yeah, explain that. I know what it is, but explain that intersectionality.
So, intersectionality is the idea that you have multiple parts that make up a whole. So being intersectional is like every part of you coming together, but understanding intersectionality is kind of separating out those things and learning to understand other people's experience because of it, right?
Okay.
So, intersectionality, you could be a gay, adopted, black, homeless, uh, football player, right? Like you
Yeah.
have all of these different paths that create the you that is
Right.
you. And just because somebody else has those same things in their life doesn't mean they've experienced the same things.
Yeah.
And so you have this like graph in every direction. It's like 4 dimension of how you've been created as a human being,
Mm.
and the way that you've experienced it with, like, I don't know, mental health or any number of things.
Right.
It creates a human being as a whole. So you are not just you, you
Right.
are the sum of all of your parts. um, and you can break down a lot of things, like somebody's likelihood of getting a job based off of their intersectional experience, somebody's likelihood of getting married because of the experiences that they've had. And it's really fascinating.
It is. It
It takes a
is.
lot more than just a hour-long conversation to
Yeah.
cover it.
But
But
we
if
we
you
hear we hear that a lot on the news today, intersectionality with the
Mhm,
BLM movement.
mhm,
And if you're are you included? Aren't you included? What is the intersectionality that brings people to that point? And so
mhm,
I did want to get a simple definition out there for people.
absolutely.
Yeah. But I do agree that it's a lot to wrap your head around, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, human beings are really complex, and what makes us more complex is that we wonder about it.
Mm.
We, you're gonna be a philosopher for a few minutes every once in a while, thinking about, like the shower. Everybody calls it shower thoughts, but it's really just micro philosophy. Um,
Right. Yeah.
so that's what I think makes people so beautiful and unique and fun to talk to, is that they're very multidimensional. There's so many layers there that you have to really get to know. And there's so much that you will never ever understand about some people. Like, I'm a white person, I grew up in Montana. I don't have a lot of I didn't have a lot of experiences outside of what I knew as normal
Mm.
until I moved out to the Pacific Northwest. And I was like, wow, there is so much information here coming at me really hard.
Yeah.
And I am learning a lot about myself really fast. And wow, maybe I'm not the smartest teenager in the world. And,
Mm. Yeah, we all
and
hit that wall, don't we?
oh my God, I can't wait for my kids to hit
Yeah.
it. But I finally realized, like, wow, I'm not educated. And so I kind of made it my mission in life to learn as much as possible from as
Right.
many people as possible. And the easiest, the path of least resistance was becoming a hairstylist and a barber, and just asking lots of questions and being like, tell me more about your life. And sometimes I don't have any energy in me for conversation, and I'm just like, tell me something, and I know that person's going to talk, and I'm like, cool. So all I
Yeah.
have to do is be like, I know, right? And it's great.
Yeah.
I'm listening. I'm just, I have to check out every once in a while.
And people think you're amazing at conversation, but you're only just deflecting.
Oh yeah, you're deflecting, or you're just like nudging,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm
Steering it.
really good at stirring the pot, nudging
Yeah.
those like interesting questions, making people think. Lately it's been really interesting. I find myself really fatigued because I'm having all these political conversations, and
Mm.
it's so taboo as a person who does hair to talk about politics. And I'm like, well, I'm a
Sure.
barber and I do what I want.
There you
Um,
go.
stir the pot a little bit, but I learn something from everybody.
Yeah.
I either how to be more gentle with people, or like how to temper my anger, or there's something that you can learn from
Put
every
words
single
behind
person.
it. You have to soften it up.
Yes.
And that's where this non-binary choice really
Hmm.
stemmed from, because people assume that because I feel one way, that I feel that Donald Trump is burning the country to the ground, that the
Mm.
best option and only option we have to replace him is Joe Biden. But that doesn't mean I support everything that Joe Biden does. I just want to
Right.
get out of the situation that we're in. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean I agree with everything the Democrats do. And I
Right.
certainly don't disagree with everything that Republicans used to stand for and may stand for again. And it
Yeah.
bugs people that I don't feel there should be a border, but I think that we should be able to keep our rights.
Mm.
I think life should be based more on my choice. I don't think the government should say I can't,
Mm-hmm.
and unless it hurts somebody else. And I'm pretty liberal on some things, but I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
conservative on other things. And I don't know why we've been pushed like pepper in soap water to the edges.
Mm-hmm.
I just and so that's where it led me. How do I get people to understand that we're American? And
Mm-hmm.
as Americans, all of the intersectionality combines at that point. And if we just stuck together, we would be louder than any of these politicians that are making decisions for us.
Well, I think part of the problem there is that like there's so many people who are uneducated, so they just assume that this person is going to make decisions and that's gonna like push their life in a specific direction. Like everybody is a lot of people assume that Donald Trump is like a fucking like I don't know emperor or some shit, and he can do whatever he wants, but he can't. And we have checks and balances for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel though that we're at a place in America where we need to stop doing the pepper and soap water thing,
I
get
agree.
pushed to the edges, and we need to stop doing but this isn't as bad as the other guy thing, because we're not making any progress. You're stagnating when you're just trying to
Exactly.
like you're like Sisyphus on the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't work. It doesn't
No.
work. You can't just
If you pay attention now,
yeah.
for 20 years, things will be better in 20 years, but you can't pay attention now and expect everything that you ignored to just go
Mm-hmm.
back to right. People haven't been engaged in this stuff forever. That's why
Yeah.
it is how it is. But that's the
Right.
problem, is because they're saying, oh nope, don't look at us, pay attention to that black guy, he's going to rob you.
Right.
Or, oh, those Latinos over there, they're jumping over, don't look at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think I said it to Adam that we're all wearing different hats, but we're screaming up at the sky for equality, and
Mm-hmm.
we all want it.
Right.
The white people in the MAGA hats, they don't feel they have it for some reason, but neither do the
Right.
black people or the Latino people or the
Mm-hmm.
transgender people or the disabled people.
Right.
But we're all the same people.
Right. We are. Like I always say that we agree on most things.
Mhm.
We just have different ways of wording those things. So
Right.
everybody like I think we talked about before, everybody wants to house the homeless, or we need to take care of the problem, right?
Right.
It depends on the side that you're on, but
Mm.
the thing is like
That's a thing for me.
homeless
Sorry.
people they need somewhere to go, and the
Mhm.
best way to do it is to put them in homes. And it's a fiscally conservative thing to do, because it's going to cost you less money to keep them in homes than if they get
Mhm.
sick and you have to send
I
police
agree.
and ambulances out. And it's going to cost taxpayers less money,
Yep.
and it's altruistic. So you're looking at you know you could appease both sides,
Mhm.
but people just want to argue. They want to argue about something, or
Well,
politicians want us to argue, because I firmly believe that politics is corrupt, and I don't know what they're actually doing while they're getting the rest of us to bicker about stupid shit like what do
exactly.
we do with homeless people
Mhm.
or Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
It just
I
feels
so
so
we
cyclical.
interviewed Lauren Culp, and
Hmm.
Adam's question to Lauren was, "What would you do about the homelessness problem?" And he
Hmm.
said, well, Adam said, "What would you do about the homeless?" And he said, "Well, the homelessness problem is the homeless." And so the next day I had to tell Adam, I said, "Look,
Hmm.
here's the stats. out of the 21,000 homeless people in your city, 1,400 of them are families. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like 2,000 of them, 5,000 of them are under the age of 24. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like 2,500 of them are veterans. You know,
Mm-hmm.
5,000 of them are chronic homeless people. And
Mm-hmm.
so let's get the good people into the homes, give them the vouchers that
Mm-hmm.
the state offers, get landlords to accept them, get that dwindled down to the 5,000, and then you'll know the problem you're dealing with. Because you can't say 21,000 homeless people are the problem if
No.
they just fell on the hard times. And you
Right.
wouldn't want that if somebody did that to you, if you became
Mm-hmm.
homeless. And I have a real problem with people's stigma of the homeless. You know what I
I do
mean?
too. Because I don't know of a single person who would do that by choice.
Right.
It's a pile of circumstances that have brought them to that area, and I've heard a lot of, well, it's all the drug use. I'm like, I would be shooting heroin too if I was homeless, because how the hell else are you supposed to not be hungry, be
Right.
warm, not be laying on a sidewalk? Like, what are you talking about? It's a
Yeah.
drug problem. No, it's a capitalism problem.
And it's a
Like,
drug problem for 1,000 of the 5,000 or
right,
2,000 of the 5,000, but not
right.
the 1,400 families and children.
Mhm. You know what also causes people to use drugs? Childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But why aren't we talking about that? Like, why are we look at survivors of childhood abuse as if they're heroes, but we're looking at homeless people as if they're scum? Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
These are still human beings. Like,
Yeah.
the more dehumanizing language you use, the worse off everybody's going to be.
Yes, I
It's
agree.
I'm sick of these monsters or these illegals. It's like, so you mean these people? These
People.
people.
Yeah.
Because not a single person that I've ever heard of is a monster. They're a person who did bad things.
Yep.
Uh, they, they there's a really excellent book called Evil Men, and it talks about the banality of evil
Hmm.
and how easy it is for people to shirk responsibility for evil actions if they're being told what to do by an authority figure, particularly somebody in a uniform.
Hmm.
There's whole experiments done on this. They were very um, unethical, maybe a little bit, but not they didn't. It was traumatizing for the people who participated, essentially, in some
I'm
ways.
sure.
But the fact is, like, people want to be able to say, oh, well, it's not, I didn't, I was just doing what I was told,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm looking at what's happening in Portland and what's potentially going to happen in Seattle and what's happening in Chicago and all over the United States right now with the
Hmm.
Department of Homeland Security flying in. And I'm like, do y'all really think that what you're doing is right?
That's my question.
Have you been indoctrinated into that bullshit so hard that you're willing to shoot an unarmed human being in the head with a rubber bullet and fracture their skull because you because they're bad, or
Because,
because you don't have to carry responsibility because you have
right.
immunity? Like, oh,
How
it's
how bad does
absurd.
somebody have to be to get their skull fractured?
Not very bad at all, turns out. And it
Right.
turns out it's really easy to do what you were told, which is shoot unarmed people, because it's not your responsibility. You don't have to
Yeah.
take responsibility for that action. You literally can get away with doing whatever you want, and that is an abuse of power, and that is really ugly, and that's what we have going on in the
Yeah.
US right now. And
It's
that's
called tyranny.
absolutely, absolutely.
I
I
just
remember.
saw a Trump supporter just burned her shirt and said, "I am for law and order, and this isn't it."
Mm-mm,
So
no.
I don't know who's doing anybody any favors with this.
Yeah, like how the fuck do you serve and protect when you're shooting people? Like,
I don't know. Moms getting tear
yeah,
gassed,
yeah.
a mayor getting tear gassed.
But like, are we more upset about that than like the moms who were getting murdered by police before this? Like, so my biggest concern right now, and what I think is really interesting, and I don't really know what the real answer here is like, where was the governor and the mayor when the local police were doing this to protesters?
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, when Trump sends people in, like where he's, like they're like, oh, well, evil Trump. I'm like, okay, but your police were doing the same thing. So where do you draw the line there?
yeah.
Like, why didn't you do something before this? Was this what you were hoping he would do so you could further your political agenda? Like, I don't
Interesting.
like Trump. I think he's horrible, like terrible.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but like,
I had said that they should put the National Guard on the streets of Chicago before the protests because 3-year-olds were getting killed on a daily basis.
mm-hmm.
But I don't think they should send them in to attack protesters,
Right. I think that, having the National Guard there to protect the protesters from the police in riot gear would have made
Yes.
sense because that's what the
Yes.
National Guard is for. Because they're the protesters are getting their rights violated
Mm-hmm.
all over. Like, you have a constitutional right to protest,
Right.
but now you're going to get tear gassed and shot with rubber bullets and plowed over by
Yeah.
people in riot gear who have no they're not going to ever be held responsible for anything that they do. That's absurd.
Right. But that's been going on, like you said, in smaller doses
Mm-hmm.
for forever.
Right. Well, it was we did a really great experiment with putting Mexican kids and parents and families in detention camps.
Yeah.
They did the same thing. The Department of Homeland Security came in and they took all of these people, and nobody batted an eye. A few people were upset about it, but like there weren't like protests about that, and it was a great pilot program to see what people would do when they did it to regular Americans that didn't agree with whatever rhetoric was out there.
Yeah, that's like a
know.
speech or something, right? What they did to them, they'll do to you.
Mm-hmm.
Just to
Right.
paraphrase, what they
Just
do
to
to them is
paraphrase.
practice for what they'll do to you. And
Uh-huh.
I can't ever get people to understand that.
No.
They feel so far removed. Elon Musk had a tweet today that said, I don't see why there's another reason for a stimulus package. And all I could respond was with ivory towers, huh? You know what I mean?
Right. I don't see why. Well, congratulations
I
on
mean,
your
he feels
lots of money.
he feels so far removed. But
Yeah.
honestly, if Trump is trying to make Russia, Elon Musk is going to have his stuff taken away, and he's
Mm-hmm.
going to be the poor guy because somebody's going to take Jeff
Right.
Bezos's wealth, and he's just
Mm-hmm.
going to become an oligarch or whatever that is with less than he has, and he will be
Mm-hmm.
the one that's oppressed. And if he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stand up for us now, it's going to be him at some point.
Well, that's the thing. It's like these people are so far removed from what everyday reality looks like that they can't even imagine what it's like. Like,
Right.
my favorite idea is like, okay, well, why don't you make Congress live on minimum wage for a year and see what happens? I bet there's going to be plenty of policy changes.
Yep.
People are like, well, what is a living wage? I'm like, well, how much is rent? How much do people have to pay off the credit cards that they accrued debt on when they were in school, or when they had the emergency, or when that one time they got really sick and they didn't have any sick pay, and they had to still, I don't know, buy groceries. Like, that stuff adds up, and it's just
I'll tell you,
it is so absurd.
a living wage is not $60 billion a year, Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean?
No, it's not.
So it's, but I can't blame him for doing that. What I find amazing is that somebody saying that to Elon Musk will get attacked by people that have nothing. People will spend their last dollars on a Donald Trump hat so that they can go and get sick at one of his rallies and get their family sick so they can say he saw him, so he can say, I don't even know who that person is.
Well, that's the thing, is you need to get people's buy-in, and the brilliant
Mhm.
part of current politics is you're getting the buy-in of some of your constituents, and whether it makes any sense or not, like, obviously it's been proven you don't have to have any coherent thought to be able to get buy-in from people. You
Right.
just have to say something that they've always wanted to say and never been able to say.
Wow.
And just because they're able to say it now doesn't mean that he gives a shit about you.
No, he doesn't. But we'll spend our
um,
last dollars on it, and we will. Here's the thing I say. If you want to start a civil war, wouldn't it make more sense to do it with universal health care? You know?
right. Exactly. I grew up, in Montana. We had like the Montana militia, and
Mm,
I'm like, where are you guys now with our tyranny and all this stuff? Like, oh
right.
my gosh, what is happening? And they're
So
like, well, see, told you so. You should have got your guns. I'm like, oh, come on, you back ass words. Like,
yeah, the war is coming, right?
uh-huh.
It's that
Oh.
binary choice, though. It's either,
Hmm.
yeah, it's either war or peace.
Right.
But it's only peace on their terms, and peace on their terms looks like nothing to peace on my terms.
Hmm. Well, the funny thing is, like, nothing gets done to change policy unless there is, we can't take the path of least resistance here. Like, protesting
Right.
needs to happen. It's always worked this way in America. If
Mm,
you read any of your history books, we got the
yeah.
Boston Tea Party, we've got the, we've got workers' rights. Like, how do you think all this stuff came about?
Yeah.
Politicians all of a sudden went, you know what I want to do? Pay people more money and make them work less.
No.
No, are you kidding?
No.
People protested for this stuff, and
Somebody
those
said the
protests
protests have
always,
never stopped.
no, right, in some form, no. And some people, and all of these protests, some property was damaged, so it's not
Hmm.
a riot,
Right.
it's a protest with, like, points to get your attention. Yes,
There
we're
you
gonna break
go.
some shit, but guess what? You have the money to fix it. Like, Target was really graceful about getting burned down.
Yeah, it
In
was.
They were like, you know what? It's just a building, but you
Yeah.
can't bring back the Black lives that have been murdered by police. So
Right. We have insurance.
Target was like, middle fingers, we're handing them out today. This is going to be great. And I was like, see, I'm more willing to shop at Target because of that,
Yeah.
and they knew they would lose some people, but I don't think those are the people that they want to shop there, you
Agreed.
know?
Agreed.
So, like, I don't want your gross, your dirty money, like, I just don't really care. Like, I don't want to be surrounded by people that are horrible. I want to be surrounded by people that are good. Now, I can tolerate more of the horrible if I have more of the good.
Agreed.
So, the more people you surround yourself with that are good people, the less you have to shoulder the horrible things on your own.
That's what I keep telling Adam. He says, what is the problem with why can't we all get along as countries? And I said, because if you have 10 givers and one taker, then the 10 givers have to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so if you have a North Korea, everybody has to protect themselves because we
Mm-hmm.
can't just give. I told him,
Right.
after the end of World War II, the United States sent boats and ships and tons of tractors and grain and wheat and everything to Russia so they could
Mm-hmm.
rebuild. And then we created NATO and said, let's go have a talk, Russia. Let's figure this out. And Russia said, fuck you, and walked away. And we were butthurt. And then Russia
Mm-hmm.
started taking over all these countries. But
Mm-hmm.
we didn't start it. We didn't
Right.
start it. There's nothing that we did to Russia that wasn't done to us already. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we were friends with them in the war,
Mm-hmm.
and something changed and we had to protect ourselves because of it. And that's how life is.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that you just have to roll with things, and you have to, like, understand that people are going to change and things are going to change. And
Yeah.
if you can't adapt, it's adapt or die. That's nature, right?
Yeah.
That's why we see evolution. It's adapt or die, adapt or die.
Right.
And like there's a certain point where it's like I don't know if we can recover from at this point. Like I don't know that people are willing or able to adapt at the rate that needs to be
Yeah.
happening right now. And so I don't know. I'm sometimes hopeless, and today is one of those hopeless days where I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't
Just
know if there's
imagine the forest burning to the ground and nothing left, and then a year later
yeah,
just sprouts of
exactly.
community.
Hmm.
Communities will start popping up,
Yep.
and they'll grow, and then somebody will be like, "Well, I don't agree with this." Like
Right.
everybody was Catholic
Yeah.
until they said, "Well, you can pay for penance," and then suddenly the Baptists went, "No, that doesn't make sense. We can't pay
Right.
for absolution," and
Hmm.
so they split off, and then they became something, and then they divided. It's just how the world is, just like cells. Cells divide,
Yep.
divide, divide, and then they die.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was interesting. I knew a biology PhD, and it seems really disturbing to hear it, but he always used to say to people, "I hope you live long enough to get cancer,"
Hmm.
um, because after a while, when you have cells divide and divide and divide and divide, they start mutating and they can't divide properly anymore, and then you
Right,
eventually that's a life cycle. Like you have something has to end this series of events,
right.
and that's what's interesting is like you get that meaning of life from knowing that there's eventually an end. But the same thing with policy and politics is like if you divide like the church, right? Christianity
Hmm.
is a great one. So you're dividing all of these sects, and slowly it's breaking down. It's this
Yeah,
church system is completely crumbling because they can't agree with each other. They're constantly infighting. They're saying one says one thing, one says another thing, and you just can't be consistent using the same book, the same rhetoric, but like
right,
changing one little thing and being like, well, now we're Episcopalian,
right.
It just it dilutes the
You can't
original
you
intent.
can't make laws out of metaphors and expect to be consistent.
Right. Absolutely. And what people don't realize is how metaphorical a lot of things in the Bible are. And
Right,
they don't understand that there were a lot of metaphors that don't translate into English, from
right.
Aramaic to Greek to
Mhm.
Latin to Greek again to, and ancient Greek. And you're looking at all of these things. And like my favorite
Right.
passage is it's easier to get, oh, what was it? Something about trying to put a camel through the eye of a needle.
Mm. I've heard it, but I don't remember it.
Yes. So the I I took a class about it. Actually, it was really interesting. It's so the idea of putting a camel through the eye of a needle. What's the first thing you think about? Right? Is a big camel, an animal,
Right.
and a tiny little needle, right? And you're like, it's impossible. No rich. Oh, it's a you can't. Rich man can't get into a heaven, basically, like based off of his riches alone. So, um, there people look at this and they take it really like literally. They're like, oh yeah, no, of course you couldn't. A rich man's not going to get into heaven if it's trying to put a camel through the eye of a needle. Well, a camel in ancient Greek is the same word. I think it was like Latin or something like that for a big mooring rope, like a ship rope that is like this big around.
Okay.
So that it was like a slang term for that type of rope. It was some sort of like jute hemp thing that was like really large.
Gotcha.
And so people look at this and they're like, wow, what an interesting metaphor. And it's like, well, I mean, it's just like trying to thread a needle with something that's too big. Like it's,
That's funny.
the
Can you give
breakdown is really interesting.
Can you give me just a second?
Of course.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Sure. Whoa, I'm losing it. Mhm.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Did you move?
Did I move? No, I was put my computer down.
Oh, okay. I've been looking at your background. It was different.
Oh yeah, that's my fireplace, and I have,
Nice.
all sorts of weird stuff. My art in the background. This is a piece that was by my high school art teacher, who was also my neighbor growing up. So
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
she was like, I wanted you to have it. She gives me art all the time, and it's wonderful. She's incredible.
I wish I had more art, honestly.
Well, I mean, uh, let me know. I've been doing a lot of that recently. So
My friends' daughters, they like to draw anime, manga,
Mhm.
and so I sent them some pictures of one of my friends, and I said, my escort friend, and I was like,
Mhm.
can each of your girls just look at these pictures? I want the image of a tooth fairy, you know,
Mhm.
and she has a rabbit, because they both kind of come in your bedroom at night.
Yeah.
and I
Right.
and I thought that would be so cool if she just came over one day and saw it. So both of her daughters, I wanted them to work on it separately,
Mhm.
so just to get the two different aspects. And I told them I would pay them, but I said,
Yeah.
here's the pictures. I'm not going to think about it again. If you come up with something, that's great.
Yep.
So I'm
Yeah, I love
excited.
that kind of stuff.
Me
I
too.
love art. I think it's so interesting watching people grow in that. Uh, you
Mm,
know, everybody's an artist in some way. They just don't realize it.
yeah.
Um, you have to find your medium, and that medium might be paint. That medium might be hair. That medium might be creating computer code, which is incomprehensible to me.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, what is all that
I've
business?
tried. I can't do it.
Yeah, no, I can't.
Mm-mm.
I don't understand a single bit of it. And then my husband's like, this is really beautiful. Look at this. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. But I think that's
I
a
think
really
art is the
interesting.
creation process, though.
Yes. Yeah. I think, well, I've read something recently about um, play and how adults are not expected to play. And um, art is the way that adults play now, like the acceptable way that
Huh.
adults have figured out how to play. And
Isn't that
uh,
funny?
I think it's really interesting because,
I think every
like,
adult is a child these days, and all they want to do is play, and everything they do is a way to play when they shouldn't be.
well, and I think that's because we work too much and we're
Mm-hmm.
compensated not enough. And
Right.
so we don't have time to, hi, Billy, my dog. We don't have
Yeah.
time to play. Oh, thank you for sitting on my
Yeah.
gross.
That's what I say. Drugs are a vacation for poor people.
Absolutely. Well, it's escapism. You're just trying to escape the
Yeah.
reality that is around you, and
Yeah.
not everybody knows how. Like, I admire the shit out of LARPers, live action role play, I'm like, I could never, I would be so embarrassed. But
I couldn't
God,
do
what a
that.
cool
No.
thing to do as an adult is just not give a shit, dress up as an elf, and go hit people with a foam sword. That sounds great,
Right.
you
Now
know?
I'll do that in the privacy of my own bedroom.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I wouldn't brag
Uh,
about it.
well, I mean, um, it's, I feel like Halloween is like pride for the normies, they're like, yay, I get to be a fucking weirdo for once. And that's also what I love about Burning Man is like
Same
weirdos,
thing, right?
you know although unfortunately it's like a lot more people are like, I just need this shot for the Instagram, they just want to be pretty with Burning Man as a backdrop, and it's just
Right.
it's
It's amazing how
bastardized,
many
the whole
moments
thing.
get ruined by just selfies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently have like stopped really taking a lot of pictures of things.
Yeah, me too.
And especially selfies. I'm like, I don't need proof that I did the same face today as I did 20 days ago.
Right.
Do I really look that different? Not really. I I put down the camera more and I try to experience things more. And
Yeah.
it's it's definitely been interesting because like memories are so fallible and human beings are so fallible
Yeah.
in their truth, right? Truth is so different to everybody, but
Mm.
um, I think it's more interesting, and I think it engages your brain more than just capturing a picture and then walking away. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's incredible to me. Um, I recently found out that you can write reviews on the internet for national parks
Wow. Okay.
or like national monuments, like the Grand Canyon, and people write bad reviews for the Grand Canyon and Glacier National Park. They're like, I mean, it was okay, but, or like, it was just a big hole in the ground. What, like, I'm like, how do you not see the beauty in that? But I guess
Yeah.
not. You know, some people think that a cityscape is beautiful, and some people think mountains are beautiful. So
Mm.
value is different to everybody.
But it's only valued if you look at it, right?
Hmm.
That's
Absolutely.
interesting. I like it all. I just think it's all kind of amazing. But I also think to myself that I'm on a rock going like thousands of miles an hour, billions of miles in space. You know what I mean?
Right?
Like every day, like we're just spinning at 180 miles an hour, like on a
Yeah.
piece of rock, and we're going.
Yeah, and like, how do you not notice that? Like,
Yeah.
I wonder what it was like to be the person that realized how fast we were like flying through space and
I
being like,
know.
what? Like, how do you wait? What? Like,
Yeah.
that's not possible. Like, wouldn't you fly off? Like, it's
Yeah.
gravity. Like,
Why aren't my
wow.
cheeks going?
Right, exactly. Well, what was the short story? The day the Earth stood still, or something,
Hmm.
where like if we stopped rotating, everything would just like it would be awful. It would be catastrophic.
Oh,
And I think that's really fascinating,
it
interesting.
is.
It's
And
like,
so
whoa.
I appreciate that. And I want to say about uh, immigrants, I think to myself that
Mm,
if we removed the borders, we would see that migration patterns are like weather, you
mhm.
know? And I honestly think before there was borders, people just they walked. You know, they walked
Yeah.
across the Alaskan land bridge to get here.
Mhm.
I can't imagine like I don't know, somebody from over here going, ugh, no. You know what I mean? You stay there. And so
Uh-huh.
it just bugs me that I can't just go to Italy and live, you know, and then come
Mhm.
back here and live, that I have to be one
It's
or the
arbitrary. It's power.
yeah.
It's power. It's arbitrary. It's
Yeah.
you don't go to the Canadian border and say, "Ah, there's the border."
Right.
It just is nature. And unless you're on a highway and you're like, "Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
here's the border." But there's not a delineation. You don't say, "Oh, look at this. Now we're in Colorado. It's totally different." You just
Right.
it's all a concept. It's a social concept. It's a form of control. It's a form of power, and
Yeah.
I just think it's gross because it just makes everybody different. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
enhances the differences between people in a way that people think is bad.
Yes.
I'm
And I
like,
believe that the border traps people here just as much as traps them there. I told
mhm,
Adam, I said, wouldn't your
agreed.
mom love to be able to live in her home again? Just live in Mexico and be in Mexico,
Hmm.
but come here when she wanted to see her family, or you guys have a ranch there and a house
Right?
here. And he said, yeah. And I said, everybody I know is saving up money and getting a ranch down there because they can't make enough money there. And he
Hmm.
said, well, there's a lot of danger there. And I said, there's a lot of danger there because a border prevents us from helping. And he said, I never thought about it that way. And I said, well, imagine if there
Right.
was no border, it would come here and we would take care of it, or we would go there and help take care of it. The only reason
Mhm.
we don't is because there's a border. Life would be so great for everybody without the border.
Right, exactly. That's the problem. It's like,
Right.
we have borders within America, but we're all Americans.
Right. Yeah. But in
Why
Europe, they call it countries. Here we call it states.
exactly? And really, it's like, the United States are not so united right now. And really, is
Right.
it so dangerous there and not dangerous here? Because I feel like right now it's pretty dangerous here if you're dissenting, if
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yeah.
like, well, I don't believe that, it's
Right.
arbitrary decisions on whether or not you get to live or die.
It's very arbitrary. Agreed.
And
It's
it's just
just as random
it's
as the planets
bullshit.
flying in the universe. It is.
Absolutely. And it seems, I guess, as a layman, I guess, of politics, it seems just, it doesn't make any sense to me, to create all of these problems where there are no problems.
Right.
And I always wonder what the greater reason is. I'm not so enlightened, but
Me neither.
um, I wish I was. I wish I could just know, like, okay, but why are we doing this? It's just so stupid.
Yeah.
It's
I talked to a lady in England, and I asked her about, how they were doing with, because they go through Brexit or whatever it is. And I
Mhm.
said, are you guys just as divided? And it turns out that Brexit was because the European Union believed in open borders, to
Mhm.
where people could just go wherever they wanted, that the Syrian immigrants could just go
Right.
wherever they settled.
Mhm.
And half of England said, we don't like that because we don't have enough room. But that's kind of assuming that they're going to want to fill your country, like
It's a
maybe they
lot of
just want,
assumptions.
maybe they want to go to the end of the earth and then start walking back, because that's what I used to
Right.
do as a kid. I'd go as far as I could and then go, oh, okay, and walk.
Mhm.
If I got to England and I was from Syria, I don't know if that's where I would want to locate. You know what I
No,
mean?
it's dreary and cold, and the
Yeah.
food is weird. Like,
Right.
go
and it
somewhere with good food.
And it
That's
turns out that the Syrian immigrants are actually so beneficial to Germany that they have sparked new economies and new industries, and they come up with just new things, new innovations. And so
well, I believe in immigration. I believe in being able to move and go to different places and experience new things, because the more
hmm
cultures you come into contact with, the more enlightened you become, right?
agreed.
Um, so I also, as somebody who's managed people before, believe in always surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me.
Mm,
Now, that doesn't mean more intelligent. That just means they have information that I don't have.
right.
And I don't want to be surrounded by, I don't want to be in a sounding board. I don't want somebody to be like, yep, you're right. I want somebody to challenge me
Yeah.
and my ideas. And so, yes, bring those people here,
Yes.
because obviously the American way ain't fucking working right now.
Right.
Right? Like, invite those beautiful different things in. Like, the Statue of Liberty says really inviting things, but the way that we're behaving is not inviting, and that's just because somebody is trying to force you to believe that these people are stealing your jobs, even though it's not them. It's the oligarchy. It is
Yeah.
Amazon, and
Yeah.
it is people like Donald Trump, that it's people like Walmart. Like,
Yeah.
they're not stealing your jobs. Also, like, the immigrants who are working jobs for less than minimum wage in terrible working conditions, you would never do that anyway. Like,
Right.
you would
But,
never work in a field for minimum wage. Are you high? Like, come
right.
on, you sensitive white people,
But
get over
you're
it.
never going to get a job building tables if there's nobody buying tables. So
Right.
you need those people coming in
Hmm.
and starting, and because once you get a dining room table, like if you're a rich person, well
Hmm.
off, you inherit a dining room table from your grandparents. That's it.
Hmm.
You're not buying another dining room table. But
Right.
somebody with less money, like you said, with the vacuum, is going to buy an IKEA table that doesn't last as long with the kids that they have, and they're going to be spending more. So
Yep.
you need more people coming in to buy a table and buying a table. And
Right.
that's why they don't believe, they believe in people. They believe in how do I say it? They're pro-life, right? They're pro-life because they believe in continuing to create people, because it's a consumer economy. The Catholic Church
Absolutely.
says no masturbation because they want full pews. They want more people.
Absolutely. That's the thing. It's like, oh my gosh, it's
Right. So you can't
you got
kick
to
out
listen to
people.
what somebody says and understand what they say, not just
Yes.
hear them. And a lot of people listen to politicians, but they don't actually hear what they're saying. That's the problem.
I don't think they listen. I think they read a headline and say, "Now I know everything now."
Oh Lord Almighty! Don't
You know
even
what
get
I
me
mean?
started. Oh, it's pretty terrible when people are like, "Oh yeah," and they share something, and I'm like, "Do you realize what this even says?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what you just said out like on your Facebook to
Yeah.
everybody? Like, what?" How, my my biggest pet peeve recently is reading mass publication news articles with poor editing. Like, okay, so what did you do, editing for content, or did you do editing for ease of reading or for spelling? Like, did you do any of those things? I've read so many articles with misspellings or typos or just all sorts of things that I'm just like, I can't take this seriously. I have a
Right.
hard time with that. Like, why aren't we more careful with the information that we put out?
'Cause
It makes me
everybody's
think that
putting
they
it out.
didn't fact check if there's
Exactly.
a bunch of like misspellings or typos.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So Lauren Culp, you know who Lauren Culp is.
I do.
Yesterday he put out a tweet saying, "Reopen everything, Inslee. Look at the curve. It says that we're flat and we're going down." And I looked at the picture and it said this picture does not contain the last 2 weeks. Well, when did you get the picture? You know? And so
Right.
all I did was say, did you even read your own photo? Maybe your opponent has the facts, and maybe people in Washington should be more mindful, because it's not going to be you that's going to take responsibility if or when they die. And
Right.
it got retweeted and liked. And I'm
Absolutely.
not even in Washington, and it's just, it scares me, the rhetoric that goes around. Like, he knew 80% of the people weren't going to read that picture.
Of
They were
course
just
not.
going to retweet it, and he was going to get
Because they were
some.
like, yeah, I'm behind this
Yeah,
person. I'm
because
like, this is my constituent.
I want my barbershop open, you know. Well,
Exactly.
whatever it is that he's closing: funerals, weddings,
Well, that's
bars.
the problem with people, is they will follow almost anything that a person says as long as they're the right like
Yeah,
candidate. So if they're Republican or if they're Democrat, they
right.
just don't care, because all we have is this two-party voting system and it just doesn't work. Like, we
No.
talked about this before, is like,
Yeah.
why don't we get more creative with that? Because God almighty, what we're doing right now is working for the politicians but not for the people that are being governed.
Right. It allows the politicians to continually run, which gives them a bank account that they can draw on continuously. Yeah.
Live a lifestyle to which they've become accustomed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I asked Adam today, I said, "So Adam, there's 3 people on the earth. You, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. You got to run to one to save your life." He said, "I'll commit suicide." I was like, "What? Just tell me why." And why? I said, "Just tell me. I want to know what." I don't know. I'm indifferent to Joe Biden. I don't know anything about him. Why do people not like him? Well, I'd just commit suicide. I just want to know. Can anybody do you know? Can you tell me what's wrong with him? I know he was touchy-feely for a while, but I think that's
Yeah.
still better than Donald Trump at the moment. So I'm looking for something, you know what
Right.
I mean?
Well, the touchy-feely thing, and I think the unapologetic behavior for that. Like he doesn't seem to like really care that
True.
it grosses people out. And
Right.
that laissez-faire attitude I don't like.
Okay.
Now, I think he kind of rode the coattails of being, vice president for a while, and that's not working for him anymore. I
Right.
think a lot of what people don't like about him is he is really more right than he is left. He's old Republican-ish, and
I got you.
Democrats aren't. They want somebody like Bernie. They don't want
Yeah.
of old-fashioned Republican running as a Democrat.
Right. Okay.
I don't think they trust him. I think that's one of the problems. Is like he's old. He's an old white guy.
He is an old
Haven't we
white guy.
had enough of those?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like New Zealand has a female in office, and
She
they
is
have
awesome.
eradicated COVID over there, and she's a
Yeah.
really amazing leader. They
One
trust their
shooting,
leadership
all the
there,
guns are gone.
right?
Yeah.
It's like you can cry, oh my gosh, my rights. Like I like my guns, but I really do think there needs to be more legislation on who can have them, because
Yeah.
you know what was funny? I have guns and I've never murdered anybody with them. I don't plan on it. It will never happen.
Yeah.
I don't foresee myself ever being in a situation in which I could be like, I need to go run and grab my gun to save myself right now.
Right.
Because I'm also more skilled at using my words with people.
Yes.
So,
but there may come a time when you need it.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
I enjoy going shooting. It's fun to shoot at a target.
Yeah.
It just feels really good to be like, ooh, cool, I did that. I'm really good at something. But I know for a fact that the guns that I've shot guns, they were made for one reason and one reason only, and that's to kill things. That's what guns were for. So we need to have people who understand that, who have education, and have those people own guns and not the crazy people.
Yeah. Well, I think
I don't mean crazy as in mentally deficient in some way. I mean their idea of why you should own a gun is really skewed.
Gotcha. I always think the good should weed out the bad. And I said that to Adam. If you have groups and one of those people in the group isn't conforming to the policies and agreements that little group created, then yes, but I don't. We have tons of ideas. I learned to just stay away from guns with Adam because I don't
That's
care.
fair.
I don't care. I think we all we deserve the right. I believe in choice above anything, unless it comes to harming another person.
Agreed.
And so, if you want to have a gun, if you want to be racist, go ahead and be racist. Just don't hurt me, because I'm not hurting you. And
right.
I just go be racist with your racist people if that's what you feel comfortable doing. I'm not that,
Right. My favorite idea about that is okay, well, you can make a choice and you can have an attitude about it and you can believe a certain thing, but that does not protect you from people calling you an asshole.
Right.
So, you can be racist, but expect people to call you an asshole and expect sometimes to get punched in the face when you're being racist to somebody,
Yes. Yes.
You should have that expectation, and you're basically inviting people to do that to you when you're being that way.
Yep.
So I don't know, being racist,
you choose what you do
for punching, I guess.
You choose what you do, but you can't decide how somebody reacts. They get that choice.
Absolutely. It's I don't. Louis C.K. is a big topic, but he always. There was a quote from his that I really appreciated. It's if you hurt somebody and they tell you that you hurt them, you don't get to decide that you didn't.
Right.
Yeah. And I thought that was really powerful, and I think it kind of goes in a lot of directions. It's if you hurt somebody by being a dick, expect to be treated like you're a dick.
Exactly. On the other hand, if I was a dick to you and you didn't tell me, you can't retroactively make me feel bad because you didn't tell me. I'm not the
Right.
asshole. You are.
Right.
Now, if I
Call me
hurt
out on
you,
my bullshit,
yeah,
please.
if I hurt you and you call me out, yes, then and I do it again, then yes, I'm the asshole.
Exactly. But like there's that can be miscommunication, like sarcasm, right?
Yeah.
If you don't understand it and you think that I'm actually being mean to you, you need to make me aware of that so I can change my behavior. Now, if I
Yeah.
choose not to change my behavior, by all means, like hit me,
Right.
but
Exactly.
that's the thing, is like without that communication, you're not going to get anywhere.
And maybe you should hear somebody when they go dick before they go, you're a dick. Maybe you should
Right?
read the tea leaves a little bit better.
Exactly.
Be a little
Exactly.
responsive to the situation. Because people say I'm an asshole sometimes, but I start out nice. I'm like, hey, and then I'm like, hey, and then I'm like, hey, and then I'm like, hey, and
Exactly. It takes a lot.
sometimes people hear the hey. I tend to hear the hey because I
Hmm.
don't see well. I hear tones and stuff, so I pay attention to words. A lot of times I'll be like, well, I'm just doing what you told me to do. Oh, I never said no. I know you did, because I need to rely on words like people do for eyesight. I need the memory of it, so I tend to know this stuff. I don't have a photogenic memory, but I tend to remember important things that important people to me say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a harder time with remembering exactly what people say, but I remember actions and I remember how that thing made me feel.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, when you said this is how it made me feel. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Like
Right.
you almost get like sense memories, like emotional sense memories
Yeah.
from the way that people behave. And one of my favorite things is like, hey, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yep.
So you can tell people I love you, or you can tell people I love you,
Yeah.
or you can be like I love ya,
Yep.
and it all comes out in different ways, and how you say something is going to determine how somebody interprets what you're saying.
Oh man, my late wife would look at me at a party and go, I fucking love you. And that meant sit down and shut up. Or I would look at
I
her
love
and
that.
I'd look at her and go, honey, I love you. And she'd be like, we'll leave in 5 minutes. And I'd be like, thank you.
You're like, code red, we
Yeah.
gotta go.
Man.
I love it. That's great.
So, I mean, but it's and we didn't start out that way. I told her, I said, look, initially I am going to say a flurry of words that make no sense to you. But if you just sit there and listen to me, it'll make sense. And you'll realize I'm not angry at you. I'm trying to figure out why this happened.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did.
Yeah. Well, I am a really passionate person. And when I get really intense about something, I yell. And it's not because I'm angry, it's because I'm like excited or incensed, or something's going on, but I'm not yelling at a person, I'm just yelling about a thing.
Right.
And so I have to have that conversation with my daughter a lot. She's like, I don't like it when you yell at me. I'm like, I'm just really intense right now, and this is how I'm expressing it.
Right. I had a boss used to yell at me, and people would be like, aren't you upset about that? And I said, no, he just told me exactly what to do. I feel bad that it took him that much energy and emotion to actually finally say it.
Right.
Why couldn't he he's my boss. Why couldn't he say, go do that work, Jason? Why did he have to get so mad about it? But whatever he did, however, whatever emotion was behind it, the words told me what I needed.
Right. Well, there's this concept of ask people and guess people.
Oh yeah. Let's wrap up on that. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So ask people and guess people. It's a lot about how you were raised. So I was definitely raised as a guess person, but I'm more of an ask person myself. So a guess person basically infers, read between the lines type of communicator. they're like, oh, well, it would be really nice if I could get some help around the house. Whereas ask person is like, hey, I really need you to do the dishes for me. Will you please do the dishes? Instead of just like making somebody guess what
Or
their
some
intention
passive
is.
aggressive slamming dishes around, and yeah.
Absolutely. And so, like my mom was definitely a guest person, and I was like, what does she want? Like she would just be like angry all of a sudden. I'm like, why are you angry?
Right.
I'm telling you right now, I need to use the bathroom, and you've been in there for an hour and a half. And she and I have a really hard time communicating because I'm an ask person and she's a guest person.
Right.
And she wants me to kind of infer, well, this is what I meant when I said. I'm like, but I can't read your mind, Mom. Like,
Right.
I'm a very straightforward, logical human being that's also creative. And so I had to kind of figure out I don't know, it feels like playing games to me. And
Me too.
I think a lot of people see this in movies and TV, like, oh, well, you didn't understand that I said that. And then all of a sudden the light bulb comes on, like, oh, they actually wanted me to do that thing. And I'm like, what? Why don't you just ask for it? Because it's so much easier to ask and hear a no than it is to ask or without asking and always get a no, because that person is not understanding what you're trying to get at.
Or get the wrong thing, or they get the wrong impression because you weren't clear.
Right. Exactly.
If
So
somebody
I've always
matters
been
to
very
you, you should be clear.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny. When my husband and I first moved in together, I had a little air conditioning unit in our window. And he said to me one day, he's like, hey, how does the air conditioner work? And I interpreted that as, how does the air conditioner work?
Right.
I was like, well, you press the on button, the power button, the one with the circle and the line, and then you change the temperature and you can move the little. He's like, I didn't ask you how it works. I asked you how it works. I was like, ask a better question and get a better answer.
Right. My favorite
I
question.
worked with people who would ask me super basic questions like that. So my default was the basic, how does the air conditioner work?
Right. My favorite is like, are you done with this? Well, what? Are you done with it? Like, you want me to do the dishes, but you're going to ask me if the dish that has food on it is, if I'm done with it. Like, come over here and see that the dish is dirty.
Right, exactly. Do I
just
look like I'm done with it? Have I used it in like an hour? I don't know.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like,
but I have very direct friends, and I because I'm not smart that way. I'm not. I'm a bit of a beautiful mind that way, where I don't understand a lot of that stuff. I'm direct, and I don't. Somebody told me, if I was to say, she said, what should I do? And I said, do this. And she said, if I was to do that, they would think I was an asshole. And I was like, I don't know. Do you think I'm an asshole? She's like, sometimes. I was like, well,
I get that a lot. I had a conversation with my boss yesterday, and I was trying to understand a concept that I was just like, wait, what? Like, what are you saying? And I'm sure I came off as a little bit rude. Right. Because I was just trying to understand, but I could tell by her body language that she was like, why are you like this? I just got something like that from her. So later on in the day, I apologized. I was like, hey, I'm sorry if I sounded like I was being a dick earlier. I was really actually confused. And so I was frustrated with myself for not understanding. Right. And that probably came out in my voice. She was like, yeah, but that's okay. You're always a dick. And I was like, oh, okay.
That's me too. When I'm confused, I get mad at myself for not understanding, because I know I don't learn quickly. And when people put me on the spot to learn, I can't. ABCD. You can't make me learn math in 2 seconds. It'll take me longer. Yeah, and if it's that important to you, then you're frustrated and I'm frustrated.
Oh, and it definitely had something to do with numbers, and numbers just get me frustrated anyway. Yeah. So it's just like, what are you talking about? Like,
Right.
it was like yelling into the void. So yeah, ask a better question, get a better answer.
Yeah.
And I try to apply that as much as possible. And sometimes I fail.
All
And
right.
it's okay.
So let's just ask people to tell us whether they are askers or guessers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. It's been really wonderful talking to you, Debbie.
Well, thank you. You too.
You
Thank you
gonna
for
come
having
back?
me back. Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Nice. I know Adam wants you on the show. I told him, I said,
Mhm.
I want to pull her away from Adam has a beard. I want to get her over here for a little bit.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, public access is for the bigger topics. I understand. And I was like, good. It's not that I don't want Jeffrey on at some point. You know?
Oh, absolutely.
I just
Well,
kind of, I told
that
him,
man can
well,
talk.
what honestly, what you know, what Jeffrey's talking about that you know about, he's talking about learning from you. So why would I need him? But the other point is, he's like the left side of the brain and you're like the right side of the brain, and it yeah, it's tough for people.
We're a terrifying power couple. You have to like
For
separate us for a little while to get any information, because I'll talk over
Right.
him and be like, listen, you're not listening to me. So it's pretty fun.
That's, you know, the amazing thing was, I mean, our tracks didn't work out right, but we all had separate tracks, and there was conversations behind the conversations. I mean, I think I hear conversations that way, but Jeffrey, like, you were like, hi to somebody's kid, and Jeffrey was like talking to Adam about tacos while we were talking about non-binary stuff, and it was, I couldn't separate it, but the tracks didn't match up, so I had to edit it a different way. But I finally did. I didn't want to lose all that conversation. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh, I know. There's really interesting like social experiments about like talking over people, and like actually how that's a like acceptable thing in societies, and that's linguistics. We won't even go into that, but we had a very long discussion about that at one point during my college education.
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, that's what we'll talk about next.
Cool.
I know as a sound engineer, I don't like it.
Oh God, I can only imagine.
Right. There was I ended the show with coming up next on the next show, and I started saying like, magenta, is magenta a real color, and something else, and why is Sean, and then Jeffrey was like, and I was like, I really wanted the clip to fade out there, but Jeffrey cut me off. But that's how the whole, I mean, we cut everybody cut everybody off. There wasn't one time when everybody got to complete a thought in that.
Right. You get enough people in a room, and it's just like zigzags all over of like half mixed conversations. It's wonderful.
But that's what Adam loves, so I love Adam. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.
To those who would tear the world down, we will defeat you. This is our moment. This is our time. To those who seek peace and security, we support you. Yes, we can. And to all those who have wondered if America's beacon still burns as bright, tonight we prove once more that the true strength of our nation comes not from the might of our arms or the scale of our wealth, but from the enduring power of our ideals, democracy, liberty, opportunity, and unyielding hope.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbow. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life.
Ask not.
Yes, we can.
What your country can do for you. I have a dream. Ask what you can do for your country.
Poor little children. Yes, we can.
One day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression.
In this lifetime, you don't have to prove nothing to nobody except yourself.
It ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Welcome to Public Access America.
Yes, we can.
Now on Instagram and SoundCloud.
I wanted to run out of that tunnel for my dad.
On Twitter. Apple Podcast, the Stitcher Smart Radio app, Potable, and Spotify.
Yes, we can.
Public Access America. History in the making. Making history in the making.